DC Comics has been an active publisher of comic books since it put out its first book in 1934, back when it was called National Allied Publication. Over the years, DC has created and published some of the most important characters in the history of the medium, including Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, and so many more. Because the company has been in business for nearly 90 years, there are more than a few skeletons it would like to have remained in the closet. Issues with publishing, writers, artists, and more have sprung up every once in a while, and while they are public knowledge, that doesn't mean DC likes it that way. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 10 shocking cover-ups DC Comics wants you to forget. 10. Suing and buying Fawcett comics. DC has been a major player in the comic book industry for so long, it's easy to forget that in the early days, there were more than simply Marvel and DC Comics printing successful books. One such company was Fawcett Comics, and it enjoyed success for decades before troubles hit. In the 1940s, DC sued Fawcett over its character Captain Marvel. The complaint alleged that Captain Marvel was little more than a rip-off of Superman. The case went to appeal, and National Comics, DC at the time, won the lawsuit. This caused significant financial problems for Fawcett, and by 1953, it ceased all publishing altogether. DC then went for the throat and purchased the company's line of superhero characters, which included Captain Marvel. DC bought up several of its rivals in its growth to become a power player in the comic book publishing world, but its fight with Fawcett was a nasty one the company would prefer wasn't brought up in otherwise polite conversation. 9. The DC explosion blew up in its face. The DC explosion was a bold move when it was first launched, as it had the goal of overtaking Marvel in sales. The plan was to boost sales by increasing everything the company produced. The company revived characters it hadn't used in decades, upped the cost of its books, and made them longer. This was partly done to justify the cost increase, but it was more to do with the concept of doing everything bigger and better than Marvel. Books that were 17 to 18 pages were increased to 25 pages and beyond. The ambitious plan also involved the launching of 57 new titles over a 4-year period. The problem was this all favored quantity over quality. The company simply didn't have the staff of writers or artists needed to make the new titles very good. Before the year was out, the DC explosion only managed to implode and hurt the company even further. It was a dark time for DC, and it took a while before the company climbed out of the considerable hole the DC explosion created. 8. Screwing over Bill Finger. DC Comics has never been great at giving credit where credit was due, and that's especially true in Bill Finger's case. He was responsible for designing the look of Batman, which has remained mostly untouched since the very beginning. Bob Kane did come up with the character initially, but as Finger once described his original concept, it's not the one that came to fruition. Quote, Kane had an idea for a character called Batman, and he'd like me to see the drawings. I went over to Kane's and he had drawn a character who looked very much like Superman, with kind of reddish tights, with boots, no gloves, no gauntlets, a small domino mask, and swinging on a rope. He had 2 stiff wings that were sticking out, looking like bat wings. Underneath it was a big sign, Batman. Finger offered up the cape instead of wings, gloves, and he removed the color red. But DC did not credit Finger for his help in creating the character, and that was the status quo for decades. Finally, in 2015, 41 years after Finger's death, his family campaigned to have his work recognized. They succeeded, and now the creation of Batman is credited to Bob Kane and Bill Finger in all major DC works. 7. The New 52. The New 52 was a complete relaunch of the DC universe, and it was pretty much a failure. DC ended all of its longest running books and relaunched them at number 1 with a reboot. Characters were redesigned with new costumes, their origin stories were altered, and when you have characters that people have been reading for decades that get flipped into something new, you're bound to make those readers angry. Fans did not appreciate all of the changes, and a lot of hardcore readers rage quit DC altogether. Many of the New 52 relaunched series were cancelled early, and the only way DC could fix the problem was to pretend it never happened and kick off DC Rebirth in 2016. 6. Constantly firing and rehiring top talent. There's no arguing that DC hasn't had its fair share of incredible talent over the years, as many pillars in the industry have spent time working on its stories, but that doesn't mean they stick around forever. DC has a nasty habit of hiring them and quickly firing people without clear reason. Nick Spencer was given such a treatment, as he was put on to write Supergirl 60, but was let go by DC before the issue even made it to print. When this happened, he did what any talented writer would do. He moved over to Marvel Comics, where he has had a long and successful career. Gail Simone became the writer for Batgirl in 2011, but by December of the following year, she was fired by Brian Cunningham, the series' new director. This made the fans so angry, a massive campaign rose up online, and she was rehired later that same month. DC's practice of hiring and firing its talent has caused more than a few to walk away in protest. Chris Robertson, the writer of iZombie, left DC after seeing how his peers were mistreated by the company, which was restructured in 2010, causing the layoff of nearly a third of the staff. A move from New York City to Burbank, California in 2014 didn't help staff either, and many left to seek employment elsewhere, and by elsewhere, I mean Marvel. 5. Nearly selling out to Marvel Comics. Back in 1984, the rivalry between Marvel and DC nearly concluded when Warner Communications began talks with Marvel to sell off all its characters to the company. This would have basically ended DC and handed the likes of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and pretty much everyone else to Marvel. The talks were going well enough, and it was looking as if the deal was going to be signed, but it never concluded with a sale, and the reason is pretty embarrassing for DC. Jim Galton, the publisher of Marvel Comics, didn't think DC's characters were worth the money. He didn't feel like they were comparable to Marvel's characters, and he passed on the deal. That is a pretty low blow. Marvel could have ended the rivalry as the absolute victor, but instead we're still left with the two giants still duking it out decades later. 4. Messing around with Wonder Woman. There's plenty wrong with the New 52, but above all else, DC's changes to Wonder Woman angered fans the most. Like other characters, Wonder Woman received a ton of changes to her backstory, and they fundamentally changed who she was. Up until the New 52, Diana was born when her mother crafted her from clay while being guided by the goddess Aphrodite, who brought the creation to life. The point was that she crafted her without the aid of a man, but the New 52 did away with that. It turned out that Diana wasn't born of no man, she was the result of Zeus and Hippolyta getting freaky while Zeus's wife Hela wasn't looking. There was so much backlash from fans, it was clear that DC couldn't retain their changes going forward. When the New 52 came crashing down, it was soon followed by DC's Rebirth, which was an expensive way of pressing undo, as it reverted Wonder Woman back to her original, mythological, and entirely female creation story. 3. 5G and the firing of Dan DiDio. 5G was the planned 5th generation of DC's superheroes, and it was to center around a replacement Batman that would have been different from Bruce Wayne. The plan was to introduce Luke Fox, the son of Lucius Fox, who was to become the new Bat under the tutelage of a much older Bruce Wayne. DC ramped up marketing and promotions for the event, and just as it was coming to a climax, it all came crashing down. DC suddenly fired Dan DiDio as its publisher, and the entire 5G event seemingly went with him, though DC and Warner Brothers were tight-lipped as to why he was fired. There has been some indication that DC will go forward with some elements of 5G, but the firing and complete change of plans have yet to be explained, and honestly, they probably never will be. 2. The Harley Quinn Art Submission Contest. Back in 2013, DC did something innovative which was actually pretty cool. The company created a contest which would enable one lucky fan to have their art published in Harley Quinn issue 0. It was an amazing opportunity, but it also crossed the line of good taste. The contest solicited artwork from fans with the intention of portraying Quinn in a humorous situation. Specifically, the contest called for fans to draw Harley contemplating suicide by different means across 4 separate panels. One of the panels needed to show her nude in a bathtub. This didn't go over well with anyone. DC didn't really justify their call for the images properly, and while the publication was looking to lampoon the objectification of women in a comical way, all they did was do exactly that, but without the satire. Fans were angry, and so were artists, many of whom posted images calling out DC for the contest. 1. Screwing over Siegel and Schuster. The most notorious thing DC has done in its 80+ years of existence revolves around one of its core characters, Superman. Back when Supes was first created, he wasn't thought up in-house by the staff of the company. Superman was the brainchild of Bill Schuster and Jerry Siegel, who came up with him while in high school. The pair attempted to get their creation published for years, and they finally found a buyer in National Allied Publications in 1938. The young men sold the character to the company that would become DC for $130. Superman went on to become one of the most iconic superheroes in all of comics, and although the pair continued to work in the industry, they never received the recognition or respect they deserved. In 1975, they launched a campaign at DC shaming the company for its treatment of them. They finally received the credit they deserved, as well as a pension, but the fight continued with lawsuits brought by the pair's family after their passing, and it wasn't settled until 2016. The Siegel and Schuster lawsuits and public shaming campaign are a dark stain on DC's history, and despite winning the appeal in 2016 relating to a transfer of rights, the company would prefer to move on and leave the negative aspects of Superman in the past. And there you have it, folks, 10 shocking cover-ups DC Comics wants you to forget. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at uslydawgu. I'm Will for What Culture Comics, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.